The London Underground. It's a rapid transit system that enables many people from areas of Greater London to easily access this city. I've lived here for 18 years. I can tell you that it's very useful for such journeys. However, while being a perfect system in most people's eyes, it still has its flaws. Back last year, I had the amazing opportunity to visit South Korea, specifically Seoul. And just like London, it has its own system known as the Seoul Metropolitan Subway, which I was able to ride. So in today's video, I'll be comparing both systems via four specific factors, which are the following. 1. The rolling stock. 2. The infrastructure. 3. The network itself. And finally, we'll be looking at some miscellaneous factors of both systems. But before we do any of that, let me give a quick introduction of both networks. Firstly, the London Underground. The system first started in 1863, operating a shuttle between Paddington and Farringdon using steam trains. However, in the present day, the system now calls up 272 different stations over 11 different lines throughout the different areas of Greater London. Most of the lines are very old, with the most recent one being the Jubilee line in 1979. However, the network has had recent extensions, such as the Battersea Power Station extension on the Northern Line. Now then, let's take a look at the Seoul Metro. This system opened in 1974, with Line 1 running from Seongbuk Station to Incheon and Suwon Station. Now the network has 23 lines serving 768 stations within the Seoul metropolitan area and the nearby provinces. The most recent line opened last year, which shows how much regular development the network gets. Before we continue, I'd like to remind you that if you like what you see today, then feel free to subscribe, as I will be uploading more regularly now. Also, I apologize in advance for terrible Korean name pronunciation, as I am not fluent in the language. With that aside, let's start the comparison. The London Underground uses an array of rolling stock across its 11 different lines. However, there are two ways we can categorize the current stock. Either we can categorize them by fitting them on the subsurface stock, or the deep level stock. Let's take a look at the differences between the two. Firstly, the subsurface stock. These are trains used on the subsurface lines, which are the District, Circle, Hammersmith and City, and Metropolitan lines. There are two types of stock, the S7 and the S8 stock, which look very similar. The only obvious difference between the two is that the S7 stock has more longitudinal seating compared to the S8 stock. Let's take a look at the interior. You will find information screens which display the next station, along with the train's destination and interchanges with other lines. There are fold-down seats, allowing for more space during peak times. And the final notable feature is the addition of each line's map, allowing passengers to navigate the system easily. Now let's take a look at the deep level stock, which features more variety and is used on more lines. Deep level stock is used on the Piccadilly, Victoria, Northern, Jubilee, Central, Bakerloo, and Waterloo and City Line services. The stock specifically used is the 72, 92, 96, 95, 73, and 09 stock. The numbers are the year in which the train entered service on that particular line. Now let's take a look inside one of the interiors of a 96 stock train. The difference is immediately obvious. These trains are much smaller and therefore have less headroom. However, they have more seats than standing space. There is no information board, and instead, a short announcement about the next stop and train destination is played continuously. Instead of folding seats, there is a space for luggage, wheelchairs, or pushchairs to be placed. Now let's take a look at the Seoul Metro. Now I'm going to admit that I didn't get as much footage over there, however I was able to ride lines 2, 3 and 4, however I only have footage of the latter two. This is a 4th generation 4000 series metro train which is now arriving into Myeongdong Station. The first thing I noticed when boarding is the major difference in the length of these trains, which is due to the wider Korean loading gauge. This allows for more standing room during peak times, which is apparent with the presence of more grab handles. These trains have information screens which show the destination and next stop in both Korean and English, but it also points to which side the doors will open at the next station, which is a neat little feature I wish the Underground had. Aside from that, there is a map showing the whole Seoul Metro and a lot of advertising. While these trains are fully walk-through, there are doors between coaches for some odd reason. Here is what the seats usually look like on these trains, and I must say, they are very comfortable for metro services.
The doors are on your left.
You can see this one in the right corner is a priority seat, however other trains had a more visible pink seat for such passengers. Now transferring onto the Metro 3 line, you can find these more digital route maps which show the previous station and the two next stations a train will stop at. Now let's move on to our next comparison. In this part of the video, I'll be comparing the stations of both networks and the various features you can find inside both stations. I'll be comparing North Greenwich Station here with both Myeongdong, Chungmoro and Anguk stations. After heading down some escalators, you can see an area in which you can top up your Oyster card or buy a new one, with a screen nearby showing the status of each line on the network. To get past the gate line, we must have our Oyster card on the reader and we can simply be let through. On the platform level, you can see these platform screen doors. However, these are only present on select stations on the Jubilee line. There is a map allowing for easy navigation to your required destination, which I must mention is in paper form, not digital. All the other stations that do not have screen doors instead have a yellow line by which passengers must stand behind to prevent falling onto the tracks. And finally, we have the iconic London Underground signage, which displays the name of the train station, allowing for easier recognition of the Underground to people. Now let's take a look at Seoul. As soon as I exit my hotel, I'm instantly greeted with the entrance to Myeongdong Metro Station. A lot of stations have various entrances, allowing for easiest access to them.
We're going down here.
In the main hallway area, you can find a paper map of the network. This map is a lot less complex than the other ones and has English translations for station names. Here is the gate line, which does not feature any barriers, as it helps with crowd control during peak times, and there is much more CCTV on the network than back home. There are screens which show when the next train is, however, instead of giving times, they just give the live train locations. On the platform, you will find similar platform screen doors, which feature a little screen above the doors displaying when the next train is. There are also special doors for people with disabilities, which is something you will find on the Elizabeth line too. The one thing I don't really like is the amount of advertisements on the platform. It's just an eyesore to look at. When boarding a train, instead of standing behind the yellow line and waiting for people to get off before boarding, people would form a small line at the side of the doors before entering in an orderly fashion, which is so much better than back in London. I also noticed a few oddities around the network. Every station I visited had these emergency equipment and rations cupboards scattered around the platform. After a little bit of research, I found out that this is due to the large amount of earthquakes that happen in Korea, and since these stations are so deep underground, they're used as shelters for such scenarios. This actually reminds me of how many tube stations were used as bunkers during World War II. Now let's move on to the next comparison. Now, despite how complicated the London Underground looks, it's sorted into a smart and easy to navigate zoning system. The map features 9 distinctive zones, with Zone 1 being the areas in the centremost part of the city, to Zone 9 containing stations in completely different counties outside of London. There is also Zones 10 to 14, however, these are unofficial and only for national rail stations. Now, how exactly do we pay for these journeys, and how are these fares calculated? Well, let me introduce you to the one and only Oyster card. This is a smart card that you can use to travel between all 9 official zones. You can purchase these at a ticket office or at one of these ticket machines. If you already have one, you also have the option of topping it up instead of purchasing a new one. A brand new Oyster card will set you back £12 as you pay £7 for the card itself and you have to top it up with £5 to use it. However, if you don't want to do that, you can also use alternative methods such as Apple Pay or any other type of contactless card. Now let's look at prices. Prices are influenced by 2 different factors, the zones travelled and the time of day you're travelling. If I were travelling during peak times, I'd be charged more than if I were travelling during off-peak times. So, an example of this is if I was travelling in Zone 1 only, in which I would only have to pay £2.90 during peak times. However, if I was travelling during off-peak, I would have to pay £2.80 instead. Zones is a lot more complicated to go through, but the whole premise is that the more zones you travel through, the more you pay essentially. Moving on to Seoul, which has this absolute monster of a map, and despite the vast amount of stations it contains, Seoul does not use a zoning system at all. Seoul uses a smart card system similar to London called the T-Money card. However, I was a fool and only purchased single-use journey cards during my trip. You can only purchase these at ticket machines, however, you can buy the T-Money cards at convenience stores too. For the single-use card, however, you select the station that you're travelling to, and choose the amount of cards you want. And yes, it has English translation too, in case you're wondering. So how does pricing work exactly? Well, you may want to listen carefully, as this method isn't very simple for some reason. Well, Seoul uses a distance-based fare system in which the further you travel, the more you pay. The first 10 kilometers are the base fare, at which you pay 1,401 up until 50 kilometers, at which there is an additional 101 charged to your journey for every 5 kilometers travelled. After 50 kilometers, however, this changes to 101 per 8 kilometers travelled. It's a very complicated fare system, but at least the transfers are free and the journeys are cheap. Now let's move on to our final comparison. So this part wasn't planned as well as the other 3 comparisons, but essentially I'm just comparing stuff I couldn't fit into the other categories. The first thing I like to talk about is Wi-Fi. Korea is much more advanced than England when it comes to technology, so it's no surprise that the metro has free Wi-Fi that is really fast. Meanwhile, you can only use Wi-Fi on the Elizabeth line, and that works only rarely. Next up is accessibility. According to the Seoul Metropolitan Government, only 0.6% of the network does not have lifts that allow for accessibility. Meanwhile, most Zone 1 stations in central London don't even have a singular lift. And finally, timings. The Seoul Metro services start up at 5:30 in the morning and end at around 12:30 at night. Meanwhile, London does have a 24-hour night tube service on Friday and Saturday nights. However, this is only for certain lines, and even then, only particular branches are operated at a much lesser frequency as seen on this night tube map. And with that out of the way, our comparison comes to an end. However, I would like to use this remaining time to highlight what TfL could learn from the Seoul Metro to make their network better, and what the Seoul Metro could learn from the London Underground to make its network better as well. I'll start with TfL. There are 3 things in particular that we could learn from Seoul, and they are the following: better accessibility, better Wi-Fi access, and more multilingual accessibility. It's absurd that most Zone 1 stations don't even have lifts, meaning if you're in a wheelchair or you have a pushchair, you're going to be struggling to find a way to exit the station. TfL needs to install more lifts to stations, or at least improve the step-free access experience to passengers. The London Underground is the world's first deep level railway system, so you would assume that it's the most advanced, right? Well, that's not the case, as a vast amount of the network does not have any signal at all, which is something that needs to be changed. And finally, we need better support for other languages. This is coming from someone who lives near Heathrow and has to occasionally have to deal with tourists asking questions about which station to get off at. If Seoul can do it, then why can't we? However, this doesn't mean that the Seoul Metro is perfect, as it definitely has its flaws. The first thing that could be improved is the introduction of a night service. As someone who has seen and witnessed the nightlife in Seoul, it makes no sense as to why there is no night service, as it will allow people to make it home faster and at a cheaper price as well. And the only other thing that Seoul could improve is better announcements for train arrivals. This was the only part of the network that was non-English, meaning I had to wait until a train showed up. Some screens with timings would be much more preferred to a live train map, if you ask me. And there we go. That was my comparison of the London Underground and the Seoul Metro. Of course, if you like what you saw today, then be sure to subscribe to my channel to not miss out on future videos, and be sure to join my Discord. You can find a link in the description down below. Be sure to let me know which system you think is better and why in the comments down below. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.